Okay, so this is exactly where I left off previously. We created a container for the sofa here. Now, we don't have a reference image for this, but sometimes furniture comes in sets. So you'll get yourself the big couch, and then you get a set. You get what they call a love seat. I believe that's what it's called. Again, I'm not a furniture expert or anything. But what we're going to do is basically we're going to take this couch and we're going to create a second type of mini couch, so to speak, that's going to be half of this size, just to make our scene look a little bit more detailed, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to do it based off of this object here. And this is how I'm going to go ahead and do it. I'm going to go ahead and take these two cushions. We don't need them, so I'm going to go ahead and delete them, all right? And I'm going to take this guy here. Remember we symmetrized this? Well, I'm going to take this half here, this element, and delete that. We don't need it. I'm going to take this guy down here. I'm going to select those two elements and get rid of those. Okay. Then I'm going to take this guy here, the one in the middle, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to my modifier list, drop down one over here, and I'm going to take a slice modifier. Okay. You got to make sure that your pivot point is in the center of the world space as well, which is the case here. We did that in the previous video. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I grab my slice plane. Alright, it's the only component there for this modifier. And make sure that you have angle snapping turned on up here. A is the shortcut for that. And just flip this about 90 degrees this way, so it basically cuts this sofa right down the middle. Okay, if I go to the top view, you can see that the slice plane cuts it straight down the middle. Then what we can do is use the remove bottom option down here. Make sure your operate on is set to polygons and not faces. In other words, the little quad symbol. Okay. And once you finish that, make sure that your edit poly is not in NURMS toggle mode. Make sure NURMS toggle is turned off. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse that. And I end up with this. So this is half of the sofa. What I want to do is I want to make this another half. So how am I going to do that? Well, pretty simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the object's pivot point and I'm going to place it at the center like this. Now what I can do is I can go to the modifiers and get myself another slice modifier. And now the slice modifier is going to be right in the center of the object. And I'm going to grab the slice plane. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees like this, so it cuts this thing straight down the middle. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the top here, and I'm going to collapse this. Make sure you have NURMS toggle turned off, or else it won't work very well. And what I'm going to do now is I can add a symmetry modifier to this. And the Y, flip it, and I'm going to weld it along the middle, but I'm going to use that number that I've been using before, which was 0.05. Okay, so I'll make sure that I pretty much weld all that stuff correctly. And it looks like I did. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the I'm going to take this and collapse it. I'm going to take the armrest here. I'm going to take its pivot point. And I'm going to snap that pivot point to any one of the middle vertices on this object, on the base geometry here. So you can see that this edge here runs along the exact center of our couch here. So I'm going to snap that pivot point right there. And now that makes it easier for me when I add a symmetry modifier to this guy in the Y. I'm not going to weld or slice along the mirror. I'm going to make sure I do that in the Y and flip it like that. And also make sure that the object does not have NURMS toggle turned on. It's very easy to miss that and mess everything up because of that. I'm going to take the legs down here. I'm going to take the pivot point and I'm going to snap that pivot point to any one of these center vertices for the base geometry there of the couch. Now with that done, it makes it easier for me to just take a symmetry modifier, symmetrize that in the Y, flip it. I'm not going to slice or weld. I'm going to collapse that. There we go. About halfway there. Alright, now this part here, we also have to go ahead and get this part done. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to take a slice modifier. The slice modifier is very, very useful. I'm going to slice this about 90 degrees down the middle like this. I'm going to remove the bottom. I'm also going to make sure I have NURBS toggle turned off, which I do. Then I'm going to collapse that. And you probably noticed that this seam in the middle is going to cause a pretty interesting sort of situation, because if we look at this from this angle, it's not exactly in the middle. And we can't depend on just eyeballing it and kind of roughly moving it into position. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take these two edge loops, which are pretty much useless at the moment. Control backspace to get rid of them. I'm going to go to vertex mode and wireframe mode. Make sure you have ignore backfacing turned off. I'm going to grab all the vertices there for the seam that goes in the middle. And I'm just going to move it out like this, just for the moment. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pivot point from this guy, just like we did before with the other objects. I'm going to snap it to a vertex that runs in the middle of the main sofa geometry. Now I'm going to use a slice modifier. I'm going to take that slice and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees like this, so it cuts it straight down the middle, and I'm going to remove the bottom. So there's the center of this guy. I'm also going to make sure NURBS toggle is turned off, and it is. Sometimes I'm sure that it is, but I like to double check just to be completely certain. Now I'll go ahead and drop a symmetry modifier in this guy. Flip it in the Y. For the weld seam parameter, I'm going to go with, again, a value of about 0.005. Okay, so we end up with something like this. I'm going to go to the Edit Poly node here in the modifier stack. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the Show End Result. Go to Wireframe. I'm going to grab all the vertices for the seam right there. And now what you could do is just move this seam to wherever you want it to be. So wherever you feel that it should be, go ahead and put it there. I like it like this, looks pretty good. So I'm going to say I'm happy with that. Once I'm happy, make sure again, I'm really paranoid about that NURBS toggle. If that one gets you, it's going to get you real good. So you want to be very careful about that one. And once it does get you, you'll know what I mean. Okay, so this is pretty much done. Except for the backrest cushion here. You notice that the backrest cushion is off. We need to get the left side to look like the right side. So how can we do that? Well, again, it's actually pretty simple. What I'm going to do is I need to adjust the pivot point from this guy. So I'm going to take its pivot point here. I'm going to take it and snap it to any one of the center vertices for the base geometry here of the sofa, the couch, whatever you want to call it. And now it's just a matter of slicing this guy using the slice modifier here. So rotate this thing. And you can see that the slice plane here is off. And the reason it's off is because, let me actually take the slice modifier and get rid of it, is because this guy here has pretty much been rotated and moved around, and that's going to throw things off. That's going to throw the transforms off. When you run into a situation like that, we have to use something that I haven't showed you before, but this is a perfect example of when to use this. We're going to use something called a reset Xform, which basically means a reset transform. So where can we get that? If we go to this little hammer icon, which is the utilities panel, okay, we have here by default something that says reset Xform, and the way this works is you select an object, you hit reset Xform, and Xform means transform. Okay, the X is just short for trans for whatever reason. I really don't see how that translates to transform, but whatever, that's just the way it works. It's called Reset Xform, and it resets the transforms from the objects. If I go over here, with the Reset Xform, you get this little button that says Reset Selected down here. Okay? With the cushion selected, I'm going to hit Reset Selected. And you notice that the object became high res. And I'm going to undo that one time. And everything just got messed up here. Okay, so I'm going to undo that. Okay, if this happens, that's okay. Don't worry about it. If you notice, undo is not fixing the problem. Sometimes that can happen in software where undo doesn't work. So I'm going to go over here to my Edit Poly node, and I'm going to turn NURBS toggle off. You see? That's why I'm very paranoid about that, because the moment you miss it is the moment everything messes up. Murphy's Law just kicks in full gear, and your life just gets a whole lot more interesting. Not in a good sense. Okay, so there we go. So now this thing is proper. So you'll see that the Xform creates this orange box around it, and also creates this sort of little cross-shaped icon over here. Okay, so the Xform is going to fix the translation problem that I had before. And with that done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse this. Okay, and now if I go back and I use the slice modifier, now you notice that the slice plane has been resetted and it's now aligned with the world. It's perfect now. It's not rotated at a funny angle or anything like that, which would mess us up. Okay, so I'll slice that straight down the middle like this. Alright. And with that done, I'll remove the top here. Basically make sure the left side gets removed. And collapse this. The pivot point should be in the correct spot. Now we do have an extra edge loop here that we don't need. This one. So I'm going to take the entire edge loop, control backspace to get rid of it. Or else it's going to cause some distortions and problems with our geometry. We don't want that, obviously. So we're going to take the modifiers here, apply Symmetry Modifier to this guy, and the Y, flip it. I'm going to weld the seam, but I'm going to make sure that I use a very small parameter. So I'm going to go with something like 0.005. Okay. And with that done, just go ahead and collapse this, and there you go. It's done. Alright, so we've got ourselves our little love seat, or whatever you want to call it, just a smaller version of the sofa. Okay. Kind of looks like a recliner, actually. Alright, so it's still part of the container. If I select the container and I move the container around, it's still part of the container, so I can export this whole thing out. Alright? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure that I save this container out. So right now it thinks that it's the sofa container, which is not correct. Okay? Make sure you have the Allow Edit in Place option turned on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Save As so I can change the name. And what I'm going to call this is, I'm going to call this Love Seat. I think that's called Love Seat. If it's not, sorry for the furniture aficionados out there who are picky about names and stuff like that. Oops. Whatever this is called, mini sofa, couch, whatever you want to call it, we've got it done, and it's saved out as a container, and it's ready to go. So that's going to do it for our furniture here. That's going to bring an end to this video here. In the next one, we'll just continue on with more objects here in our scene.